You did.
and managed to keep all my fingers.
That's a that's a that's actually a win, a big win. And I don't recognize your room, Peter, because
So I've repainted it, and then I'm going to put everything back up that behind me. But this is
okay,
actually the room. So I painted this more neutral gray, put in crown molding, which I've learned is completely the opposite of anything you've ever done. And because you have to cut it upside down for one thing, and then to get the miters right, and then the angles are all screwy. So I will be reinstalling the wall stuff next day or so.
okay.
So it looks like
So
looks like a real office again.
so I'm going to throw the the agenda in the chat, and Beth and Jeff and Dia could not be with us, so I'm gonna kind of go on with part of what they had been sharing, which is the value of entrepreneurial ecosystem building document.
Mm-hmm.
But but then Scott had shared some things that I think would be interesting to discuss about universal support. And then there's stuff around ESHIP, the upcoming summit around universal support. So, so to that end, hello, Norris. Why don't we do this? I'm curious because now I know that Peter has this hidden talent. For our popcorn question today, I want you to share some hidden talent or skills that we would not know you had just by looking at you or meeting you in entrepreneurship. Um, so, so that could lead to, and remember this call is being recorded and it will be shared. So, you know, answer accordingly. But let's see, I will tell you that that I don't know if it's a hidden talent because I get tapped to do this. As people know, I'm big on connecting, but I also do event planning, which evolved out of my need and desire to gather people together. So I've been known to invite people to tailgates, where we've had people from 3 continents show up um, uh, at a Springsteen concert to have a tailgate. And I organized my high school reunion from 1,500 miles away. So, so that's what I do. And Jackie, I see you have to leave early. I want to know what your hidden talent is.
Hidden talent. I like to dance.
It's a good talent.
Yeah, so I've done all different types of dancing: jazz, modern, tap, ballroom, ballet. Yeah, so it's very hidden though. How about Michael?
Hey everyone. Well, that's a tough question. I don't know. I don't know that I have any hidden talents. I'm a martial arts master. Maybe that's a hidden talent. Academia, away from academia.
What style?
Mostly Korean, mostly Taekwondo or versions of Taekwondo.
Okay, pick who's next.
Oh, who hasn't gone? Scott, have we heard from you?
I'm going to play to both Jackie and Michael's points. Jackie, I gave my wife ballroom dance classes with me for our anniversary. She and everybody else in the class asked me never to return. Michael, I've lived in 25 places over 40 years and studied about 10 styles of martial arts, and I'm equally bad in all of them because they use me as the guy in the yellow outfit, normally the crash test dummy, because I'm not gravity impaired. How about
Hey,
Norris?
Scott, I have to ask, are you, have you spent time in Korea?
I've spent time in Japan.
Great, thanks.
Norris, you're going to have to go off mute in order to answer the question.
It's the quietest he's ever been. Leave him there.
Hidden, but relevant. Interesting. Well, I say that I'm not terribly well trained, but I would bury any of you on the dance floor. Possibly not Jackie, but I'm not sure that's terribly, at least around, you know, my circle of friends. That's not. I'm usually the first person who wants to be on the dance floor. I suspect that's not terribly hidden. Maybe hidden from you guys. I used to be a really good trumpet player, and I think I would frighten my neighbors if I even tried to play now. So having a talent and letting it slide. But I guess the really hidden talent is that I used to be able to hear, listen to a pop song, and I would do the parody lyrics for it, and I could almost do it right, almost like freestyle. It came to me. Same thing. You give me a word, I'll make a corny acronym out of it for, let's say, for a project. That one's probably hidden, but probably the most dangerous one, because I remember we had some people at a rural development meeting, people were complaining, and we came up with 2 program names. The acronyms were Grief and Gripe. And what was delightful is most of them had no idea that there was an acronym there. So I'm not sure if any of those really count as terribly hidden, but let's say I can make an acronym out of anything. I'll go with that. And who are we missing?
Peter.
Peter. I think we just put Peter to sleep. Or I did.
I'm just trying to get the unmute button and my screen flew away from me. So I did 2.5 years of improv training. And I did that as somebody who had adult children. And I made the mistake of inviting my daughter to a show. And she showed up with bedazzled t-shirt with her friend saying the old guy's my dad. But I do miss it. I haven't gone back to it because I was given an ultimatum at home saying, don't waste our money on this. And so I've not done it. But anyway, well, I loved it though.
Oh, that's a shame. I'd love to see you do. You know, we talk about entrepreneurship being very much like improv. I keep wanting to do to include improv into the ESHIP summit. I think it's a little harder this year because it'll be virtual. But you know, we talk about bringing the tenets of improv. It's this and, so we don't, rewrite the things that are going on. We just add to it, which is very much like improv. And then what is it? Bring a brick, don't build a wall. So everybody contributes a little bit. So I think, ecosystem building, improv. You're still doing it, Peter. You just do it in a different frame.
Actually, so the yes and versus no but theory is prominent in a lot of the stuff that I do in terms of facilitation. But the other is, so we're doing these day after conversations, and I describe, so I did long form. I like long form. So long form has beats to it. Typically it's 4 beats. And so the design of our conversations have these 4 beats embedded in them. And it works really well, actually. So
that's great.
Yeah.
So,
and then the other thing about a brick is, you could bring a brick, but also don't throw it. But
that's super helpful. So, Scott, how are you? You're jumping right in, and we're gonna ask you a tough question. We want to know what your hidden talent is.
Oh, I have zero hidden talents.
That is so not true. So
I am as transparent as a human being can be. Hidden talents. Turned out to be a pretty good gardener.
I'm sorry.
That is my hidden talent.
Okay, you're breaking.
Actually enjoying gardening and outdoors in a way that I not.
Okay, so I got gardening. You're gonna have to type it either into the chat or
Good way
into
to get
the
out.
agenda. Since your connection's kind of breaking up. Okay, nice. We'll keep that in mind. Thanks a lot, Scott. Okay, so as many of you know, the ESHIP Summit will be going virtual this year, and that's the 15th and 16th. There will be a call for submissions that is coming out soon, so that if you have some topic or some kind of introduction to something that you'd like to share, that call for submissions should be coming out very shortly. I'll make sure that it goes on Slack and the Facebook page and all of those things. The summit itself, the registration will be coming out towards the end of the month. So keep an eye out for that. If you're not signed up onto the Kaufman newsletters or have not been to a summit before, let me know and I'll make sure that we get that to you. And knowing that it's going virtual this year, a lot of the idea is that there will probably be a wider audience this year than has been in the past. And some of these people are new to ecosystem building. And so goal 6 is going to be really important in how we message and share what all this work is about, right? Because you'll have people with varying degrees of knowledge. So Jeff and Beth have started this document, which is the value of entrepreneurial ecosystem building, which I will share in the chat. And there's some framework, and I emailed it out earlier, but these are things that they're thinking about. And so you're actually open and invited to share any more of that. Underneath, you'll see Jeff's talking point contributions. He's gonna, as many of you may know, he writes a lot for Ecosystem Builder Hub and some other things that are shared out. So he's going to start sending these messages out himself around the framework that he's shared. But you're welcome to. Mike, your question about what is the fee, the registration fee for the conference. We're working on what that looks like. It looks like a tiered model where if you're coming as an individual, it's a certain tier. If you're part of an organization, depending on the number of people that are going to be involved, it's a different tier. I don't have the specifics per se. There will be a cost, but as always, we will offer scholarships for those. And it doesn't look like what it does in an in-person event. Obviously, the cost for a virtual event is less. We're putting together, so just a little sneak peek, we're putting together a couple of different formats for the 2 days, the 15th and 16th, and we're actually working on a third day. So you are the first to hear about this. You can't tweet it yet. Okay. So the first day is pretty much an overall general information about what ecosystem building is as far as entrepreneurship is concerned. the second day is more about tools and programs and things that are going on. And we know that people like you are very interested in what building a field of ecosystem building looks like. And not everybody that's going to come to this event in this big wide open circle is as interested and involved as all of you are. So there will be another day that's added onto this. And that's more for the people who are focused and wanting to get, deep in the weeds like all of you are. So does that help? Do you have any questions around that?
Norris did a great job of telling us about Alex DeNoble's California conference when it went virtual. They had a terrific fee schedule.
Okay. And what was the terrific fee schedule? It was free, wasn't it?
Pretty much.
Okay. So I've, on a personal note, I've been attending a lot of virtual things. I was part of the NBIA conference, and we understand that that there's challenges for things that are cost, but we've also noticed that when people pay something, they seem to be more engaged, Michael. So that's a personal observation.
I agree with you. I think that, and Norris mentioned this before, so I'm just repeating what he said. What was amazing about the California conference is the breadth of people and the additional people we included. So if you're talking inclusivity, there's nothing better than going virtual.
Mm-hmm.
And if there isn't a cost element to inclusivity, then I'd consider that. That's all.
Okay. Noted, and I will definitely share that with the team. I think we don't want cost to be a barrier, obviously, which is why there's a scholarship opportunity for anybody who wants to be part of this. So we would never let costs. We've offered scholarships in the past for ESHIP. I was a scholarship recipient the first year because I was a bootstrapping entrepreneur and said, I don't have the money to come to a conference. And they said, we want you to come. So granted. And Scott, I appreciate what you wrote in the chat about the fee and how I think that there is, I used to run a golf tournament where we would have people sponsor youth. And
Yeah, this isn't sponsor. This is nobody pays for themselves. Everybody pays for somebody else.
Interesting.
And the reason is Kaufman today acts like it's all in it for them. They collect all our information and try to own it. The issue here should be, we're all about trying to get other people to attend, be they EDA people, be they academics, be they students. If you said, I'll sponsor 3 $25 students, that's my fee to come. If Michael thinks that it's important to help people from Arkansas because they're a bit slower, he may pay $50 because Louisiana can handle faster subjects. If Norris wanted to deal with people from Oregon and say that they're worth bringing into the universe, he could say, I'm going to put up $35 for 3 of them.
That's a fascinating model. I like that.
I'm going to try to get the Oregon people to, they should pay for us. But to Scott's point is that it still gives that sense of connection, because it's true that if even people pay $5, they will pay more attention than otherwise. But I was staggered, by the California conference is how much engagement, and I'm thinking, I'm looking at the audience, and there are people I've never heard of from schools I've never heard of, and a lot of them had really good ideas. I've been trying to spend some time on Brad Feld's startup communities, and I find myself talking to people who know nothing about ecosystems, but they know everything about ecosystems. That is giving them a little bit of, I think this education process is important. You know, it's sort of like there are a few who are showing up to show the peasants how it's done, and they actually have no clue. I suspect that happens in a lot of organizations, but
So let me ask just kind of an open-ended question as we talk about this, because to Norris's point, there are people that talk about ecosystem building is the buzzword. So everybody's saying it. I agree with you, Norris. I think there are varying levels of understanding what I believe to be ecosystem building. Some of it's there. I see a lot of ecosystem building out there, so that's always interesting as well. But so how do we send that message out? I mean, this is all about universal support. How do you get people on board? And that's the value of this document, right? What is the value of ecosystem building, and what is it that you want to share with people so that they come into it with that with the understanding and the culture. It's a culture shift. And I wrote a blog post not too long ago about what I no longer believe about entrepreneurship and ecosystem building. And one of the things was a pushback to Brad Feld's give before you get. I don't believe in give before you get, because I think that comes from a place of privilege. And it's hard to know what you're giving, or what you should give, or what's needed, until you actually acclimate. And sometimes you need to get before you can give. And so I like coming with a sharing mindset, but that's me. So what is it that you would want the world to know about ecosystem building and what the value is?
So I'm glad you brought up the document, because I think this actually is relevant to the conversation we're having right now. But one of the things that bothered me about the document, I thought it was overall good, but the challenge I was having was where somebody who wants to start a nail salon fits in this. It was, or, you know, something that isn't a gazelle, something that isn't a unicorn, something that isn't techie. And where I'm coming from on this is that, you know, we've been doing these conversations. I've been talking to people around the country, and I'm getting a sense that there's going to be a huge jump in people out of necessity becoming entrepreneurs. And now we could say, okay, fine, well, then maybe they shouldn't be doing it. You know, it's that, you know, just let the ones who do well survive and go from there. But I think that there's a role for the entrepreneurial ecosystem to help us to provide the framework for as many as possible to succeed as entrepreneurs. And what I didn't see in this document was the sort of the neighborhood job creators, the local, the small time businesses that need to that become part of the fabric of a community, and where they fit into the idea of entrepreneurship. And so when you talk about, you know, who can attend, or who should attend, you know, those are they may not even think of themselves as entrepreneurs. They may not put that label to them, but that's what they are. And how does this become a place where at least the idea that it's a worthy cause gets supported?
Can I ask Jackie to chime in before she's got to run off and leave us? Because I'd like to hear from you before you. We're going to miss you on the call, because
that's nice. So I'm assuming you're talking about the document that Cecilia shared that we could add to. Is that right? In which case, I went through it. I was going to do a word cloud of it to kind of see what words came up most frequently. And then I thought, well, some of it are phrases, so it would have to be coded, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so I just kind of went through with a yellow pen. And I noticed that, that there's some of these quotes support what Peter's saying in terms of they're very inclusive. And then some of these don't. So I think it's there. It's just that maybe there's some difference in opinion on what should be there. I can give you my personal opinion, but I'm not sure that at the moment anyway, I represent anything bigger than my own experiences, which are kind of vast, but still. My personal experience with, and I've had experience with the 17 regional innovation centers around Ontario, Ontario being a very large economy in Canada and North America, is that it's been very focused on tech. It's been very focused on a particular approach, a process of raising money. And if you don't fall into this box, you're out. So that works well for the people who are allowed into the box. And, you know, words like access, words like deal flow are like common language. So those are the ones that you'll hear a lot. And what you might not, well, what you don't hear as much is about diversity. And there was one word in here, I guess, one phrase that was really interesting. I don't know if I'm going to find it at the moment, but it had to do with like rejuvenating economies, rebuilding economy. I thought that was an interesting phrase, and I think that's very relevant to our time today, like our times today, like history. So the idea of, you know, preparing for rebuilding economies. So if I can leave with anything, I'd say that would be kind of the phrase that would be interesting to kind of think about as a group. So I have to go. My university has some sort of a career event right now, and God knows I need it. So I'm off.
Thanks for joining us, Jackie.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jackie.
To Jackie's point, under goal, there's working on that goal 5 X, trying to wrap our arms around all the disparate definitions. That there is a distinct difference between being an entrepreneur and being a small business owner. That's not as distinct as definitionally in terms of measurement as we would like, but there is a big, at least in this country, there's a big debate. I was reading something from a policy expert who is advising at a very high level, who basically are arguing we shouldn't support anybody but the high-tech, high-growth companies, that we shouldn't be helping small business alone at all. I mean, as in zero, which is a little frightening. And this is someone who's had his voice heard at high levels. And there's some political stuff to it that they don't want to support small business, even if it was valuable. But I think if we look at the research, and this is one of the things I took away from, you know, this CSP folks, is listening to the UN, the OECD, ILO, every country on earth that's looked at this. In every one of the last 2 or 3 recessions, who led the economy out was not the high-tech, high-growth companies. It wasn't the venture capital-led companies. It was more important that they were innovative, that they had rethought what they were. There was clear evidence that they used the bad times to rethink their business models and such. SBA was in the U.S. was very intrigued by that. So, I mean, to Peter's point is, if, you know, I would look at those nail salons that are finding new ways to work. How do they do this in this time of social distancing? I suspect they're all learning stuff, and they're learning from each other. So helping, you know, I'm more for the, you know, one hand, as a scientist, I want a very tight, precise definition of the word entrepreneur as a variable, but as something for us to support, we need to be supporting all of those, the people that we're excluding, we run the risk of not talking about the very people who are going to lead us out of the recession. And I point out that, something I had told Jackie, one of our earlier calls on her research, is that most of the Inc. 500 are not VC backed. One year there was as many as, you could argue, 470 of the 500 were bootstrapped. I mean, think about that. That even the Dow Jones 30, the 30 largest market cap companies in the world, most of them started in a recession, and very few of them got any kind of external equity until way down the road. That, yes, we want to pour rocket fuel onto these venture-backed firms and try to grow unicorns, but the reality is this is, this is a group we should be there's a group we should be fighting for. That MIT says, well, if you're a high-tech, high-growth firm, you're backed by venture capital, you are a, quote, quality entrepreneur. That just, I understand in my head a little, but it kind of burns me to think that, we're using words like that. So I'd say, listen to Peter. I think he's really onto something, and it's an opportunity to reach out. So anyone who wants to pursue innovation is somebody we should be trying to help, because they are the ones who are going to grow the jobs. Anyway, I'll get off the soapbox.
That was a very good point, Norris. Everything that you said there.
Can I rant for a little bit now, guys?
Yes.
Rant away, baby.
Gosh, let me build on what Norris said. So here's my framework. I think entrepreneurship can save the world. So I'm a little biased as I move forward. So I like Carol Dweck's work on the growth mindset. So let's talk about the entrepreneurial mindset a little bit. And if we can make this false dichotomy between growth and fixed mindset, we might call entrepreneurship the ultimate growth mindset. Whereas at the other end of the fixed mindset, we have a coddling corporation that gives you a job and enslaves you because they provide you everything from a bathroom to a water cooler to benefits to a paycheck. You grow. The ultimate growth is the entrepreneur who has no support, who is the adventurer who steps out there. So if we want to infuse entrepreneurial mindset in our K through 12 kids and then build them up in our higher education at all levels. So the entrepreneurial mindset isn't about the high-tech companies only. And to build more on Norris's point, if you just took the FANG companies out of the stock market, the rest of the economy is hurting because we don't have enough entrepreneurial spirit, enough entrepreneurial mindset, and we've seen the numbers decline. And so I'll leave you with my biggest headache right now is it appears when we try to drill down to the core of the entrepreneurial mindset, it touches some emotional chords right now, and that is dividing the country in a way. And that is the entrepreneur is much more capitalistic, and the corporate person who gets the freebies is more socialistic. But so entrepreneurship could be linked to something that's negative in our lexicon right now. And so there's a deeper question. So I think our group is so important because we have to explain why ecosystems, entrepreneurial ecosystems, are so important. The narrative is so important. So I would argue that you could have the best widget on earth, and if you don't market it and no one knows about it, what good is it? The narrative we build, and I'm guessing it's going to come from this group, the narrative is so important so that, going back to Victor's every 1,000, you got 3 plus 997. We have to sell this to the 997. Why the entrepreneurial mindset is so critical. So I'll get off my soapbox.
So Michael, but you're absolutely right on a couple key points. One is that I think the growth mindset is a useful concept. What's turning out, research is finding that it's not what we think. Is we have a growth mindset in some settings. All of us do. and we have a fixed mindset in other areas. And where did we learn that? How did we learn that? And learning to expand areas, find new ways for people to have the growth mindset is very important. A lot of it ties back. I was amazed that a young friend of mine in New Delhi, he calls me up and says, we have a problem. We're trying to do this project. We're going to teach the entrepreneurial mindset to kids. But we had a problem with the logistics. So we're only going to have 250,000 primary students getting training. I was like, only 250,000. And they did a variation of the dollar exercise. They gave these kids, and these are all, let's say, very much economically disadvantaged kids from the urban areas and rural areas around New Delhi. Gave them the equivalent of less than $5 a piece. Told them, you got 2 weeks to go make money. 96% of them made money, and these are primary school kids. Freaking amazing. Shouldn't have been surprising, but from what we've seen of what seems to map onto the entrepreneurial mindset, or a lot of them are not things that you don't think of necessarily as entrepreneurial, is action orientation, resilience to adversity, being able to connect the dots, and tolerance for uncertainty and ambiguity. These are things that are great life skills. And in fact, in some countries, they're using that observation as a way to sell entrepreneurship education in K-12.
Hey, Norris,
yes.
Can I interrupt you and have you
yes,
build
please.
on this too?
Go for it.
So I love what you're saying. And I think a key word that I've been thinking about a lot lately is pattern recognition. And so we want to teach at a very early age, call it whatever you want to, critical thinking, pattern recognition. Well, when you're an entrepreneur, you have to recognize patterns in your customers, in your market, in your segment. You have to understand. So you've got your pattern recognition radar up at full speed. When you're in a job where you're doing the same thing every day, where the corporation profits and margins from your repetition, you turn pattern recognition off. Why? Why grow if we're doing the same thing day in and day out, working for efficiencies? So I think entrepreneurship is the key to all success in the future. So I just wanted to throw in pattern recognition there to those kids, Nora.
Yeah, that actually says it, is the things that drive that, or cognitive flexibility, cognitive complexity. And these are things that you acquire by doing things that require cognitive flexibility and cognitive complexity. That, in a lot of ways, entrepreneurship is this kind of deep experiential education actually doesn't even have to be entrepreneurship, but this sort of deep, like, project-based learning really drives that. But this pattern recognition, the venture capitalists use this all the time. They think that's they're looking for a pattern that has worked for them in the past, and if our job is to decode that, I guess that's good. But and for the people getting funded, but it's also very limiting. And I think the richness of the sort of ESHIP nation is that we all have very different mental models about how various things works. And the more mental models we have access to, the better it is, easier it is for us to recognize patterns, to connect the dots, and to feel motivated to, and feel empowered to go forward. But
let me jump in here with a couple of observations. One, Michael, you mentioned, one's capitalistic, one's socialistic. What I find interesting among some of the folks that I've been talking to is that actually there are various different kinds of business models fit within entrepreneurship. So if I talk to people who are into cooperatives, for instance, their argument is that this is a strike against capitalism. That is, that they're pursuing, which I think is a little bit contradictory, but anyway. But the idea behind it that gets expressed is that this is about, collective good, through a cooperative. So I do think that there's room for different kinds of models within the concept of entrepreneurship. I also think that, you start out by saying it was probably a false choice or false dichotomy, and I tend to think that that's probably true too, because I think that you can have innovative large businesses. where the sort of qualities of entrepreneurship are valued within the business. Now, it depends on how the business is organized. If they're pursuing distributing value to shareholders, you know, that's one thing. And I totally agree with you that those businesses tend to just suck the air out of everybody and suck the soul out of folks. But there are other businesses that do differently. And I think that whether they're large or small, it really is about how the business is organized and what's valued. The other thing, though, that I think we fail to do when we talk about entrepreneurship. So I mentioned the nail salon as an example. And I was talking to somebody about this the other day, and I said, well, you know, part of the ecosystem that's going to be that can be used to support nail salons is perhaps, for instance, another kind of entrepreneur who figures out that these nail salons need to do collective buying of supplies. Or another entrepreneur thinks that, well, you know, if we could figure out a way in which we could provide basic bookkeeping services to a number of these individual nail salons and other kinds of small businesses, and that would help drive their success as well as now create a new enterprise for myself. So I think that the sort of the compounding possibilities of enterprises and entrepreneurship should be included in the sort of the conceptualization when we talk about ecosystems. That it's not just the service that's created by the ecosystem builder that is from one provider to another in terms of, okay, here we'll, you know, get you to SBA, we'll get you to this, we'll get you to financing and so forth. But part of the ecosystem are the other businesses that get generated around these new ideas, these innovative ideas. So I think it works on multiple tracks, and we don't really, you know, maybe I've been missing it, but that other piece in terms of the compounding of other enterprises, I haven't heard much talked about that at ESHIP, but maybe it is, and I've just missed it.
You know, Peter, I agree with you. I guess to expand on what I was saying earlier, there's an element. I have two students who graduated recently. One took a job at the Department of Motor Vehicles because her mom works there and got her a job. Another one took a job at the bank because her friend works there and got her a job. Those are going to be coddled experiences for the next 20 years of their life. Whereas the nail salon person, every day they're met with a new problem that they have to solve or they won't survive. So whatever it is, that's that entrepreneurial spirit or mindset that drives them through, after that is going to compound on itself, and it's going to 10 years later provide our citizenry with a capability that we can only imagine now. It's crazy versus this slow growth through a DMV type job. So because I've been struggling with this, the thing that keeps coming up is there's competition at the nail salon. There's not at the Department of Motor Vehicles. So there's this competitive element. And so I would like to see, or I guess my mind is trying to get wrapped around, let's create wealth through capitalistic competition, and then let's distribute it in a more social way. You know what I mean? Let's try to distribute our wealth in a more socialistic way. But
So
it's where it gets messy. Sorry.
Well, no, I think that's great. I think that the other part that we don't talk about is the connectivity, or the need for the because nail salons are contingent. So we keep going back to the nail salon. The nail salon's contingent on the neighborhood, right? So because the nail salon sits next to, like, my friend has a deli, and next to the deli is a nail salon. And people, while they're waiting, will come in and grab a bite to eat, right? And then the people that work in the nail salon get a discount from the deli. So it's a symbiotic relationship. And then they're able to help support each other. There's another nail salon not too far from my house that had an electrical fire. So they ended up moving in with another nail salon like half a mile away. So they shared resources, right, until the other one built up. They realized that the trend was going towards the ability to process all the stuff without as many chemicals. So now they've innovated and changed their model to fit the fact that the trend in the nail salon market is, let's be more hypoallergenic, let's make sure that we have less toxins and all of that. And then the COVID thing happened. So, you know, I mean, it's all of those things. So you're saying that it's innovative, but also the connectivity and the symbiotic relationship of that whole system is another thing that we want to make sure to highlight. I think that's what sets us apart, right? It's the difference in, you don't work in a vacuum. Everything happens in an ecosystem. And we've got to show that what happens here affects what happens there, because there's a ripple effect, and we're all part of a community in order to do that. And I think that that's what's challenging about models like the whole Shark Tank, you know, celebrity model, where it's like, oh, well, I can do this by myself kind of thing. Scott, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, there's actually, like, I need to jump off this call, but there's actually some really frustrating comments being said as someone who is an entrepreneur and also regularly inside government. You know, we have to just look at what we're valuing and why we're valuing it. There is like the drive of competition, which is why someone chooses one job versus another, or why it makes them a good entrepreneur versus a bad entrepreneur. It misses the whole innovation spirit and some of the undercurrents that really foster why we're all doing the work that we're doing and bringing innovative pieces to market. I mean, I would just stick to, how do we build an ecosystem where individuals who want an opportunity to thrive and get on the same playing field can you know, warrant their own merit? I mean, solving larger economic issues of the economy of large company versus small company, what's innovative, what's not, I think you're just going to get lost in the weeds of a much simpler question of, you know, what's the value of building ecosystem and networks in an inclusive way that allows everyone to compete in into this market space. And I could go one by one on a few of the arguments, but it's not, you know, time does not permit it.
Well, will you talk about a couple of them so that you give us a
yeah. So like the person at the person who goes into the DMV and you know, we're using like, honestly, I probably was going to focus on my entrepreneurial endeavor right at this junction, but like you know, we're talking about the pathway of the person who chooses to go into a bank, you know, a bank career or a DMV career, and there are innovations and product ideas and processy conversations on how that person is brought up. So some of the most innovative people I have met have been inside government, because they're working with inside a larger bureaucracy to understand how to get something done. You know, I've met individuals who've spent 20 plus years in giant industry, picked up the skill sets, and then know how to reform that industry. You know, right now our biggest problem is we've just tried creating a really small box of what is entrepreneurship, and we've tied it to these values that high growth venture capitalists have, versus asking ourselves, how do we simply create and bring innovative products to market, which are not the same thing? So yeah, with that, I do need to jump off the call, but I did want to just make that point to be heard.
Thank you, Scott. Scott Gillespie, you've been very quiet.
Yes, I'm here both as a learner a pattern recognizer, and I'll share a couple of thoughts building on rants, raves, and insights, because I think this group is hyper knowledgeable. One of the guys wears a hat that indicates he knows something about sports. And interestingly, I think entrepreneurship should be viewed as a sport, because unless you go through the peewees and the minors, you can't get to the majors. And all too often we try to have people skip the mechanics and the basics and go to, you've got a cool idea, go get everybody else who's going to do the mechanics, you just be the visionary. And I think the second thing is entrepreneurship, the way we're talking, is a national language. The reality is it's a local language. We have to talk about communities because the majority of people aren't mobile enough to change where they are fast. Even in COVID, we proved that people go back after a trip to where they live. So I think ecosystems are a geographic specialty that, from some work, and I'm going to just share a moment of pontification, and you can shut me up at any point. I put it at the end of the document that's on here, that with roots, you get fruits. If we only talk about fruits, which we tend to do about entrepreneurship, about necessity and innovation, we forget that if you don't have the roots, you'll never have a second batch. And therefore, in communities, you need to look at the roots that fuel the local community for nail salons and for high-tech players. And the four fruits that we identified, to simplify to Scott Resnick's point, was workforce utilization. It's not jobs. If you can increase the number of people that are working and getting paid and the rate of pay, whether it's through their own business or somebody else's, that's workforce utilization. Second, the amount of exports. If you only sell within your community, you die. You have to export to generate income. Not all of it, just some of it. Third is you have to have FDI. And in this world, if you don't have investment from another place, you'll die, because not everybody has sufficient money, be the Silicon Valley, New York, or Louisiana. And finally, if it doesn't generate a higher quality of life and you end up like Detroit, nobody will be there. And therefore, the four ingredients are the reason ecosystem architects or regional builders, or whatever the right label is, have a pattern recognition capacity that all of you are demonstrating in spades. But what we need to do is kind of deal the cards so that they play transparently and say, we need to fuel these roots to generate these fruits. And with that, individuals can say, hey, I'm not going to be able to be a player in this community because I don't fit this community's needs. I've got skills that I need to be someplace else where they value them more. Perfectly fine. But everyone else that needs to stay there because their family, their friends, their roots, their church, whatever is there, they need to recognize that the ecosystem does have physics that limit it to certain things it can do. Sorry, that's why I called it the roots to fruits model.
I like the roots to fruits model. That was great. Make sure that I've typed it correctly.
It's at the last picture in the chart. I tried
Oh
to
yeah,
put,
no, the in the agenda notes to make sure that I've captured as much. So
I apologize for the long wind.
no,
It started to
I
sound
think-
like Norris.
I love that all of you have such it's so mindful and in what you're saying. I think it's all of these things, right? To the whole conversation that we started off with Peter and improv. It's not one thing or another. It's all of you, and it's all of your thoughts coming together that makes us more relevant, mindful, aware. It's the diversity of all of the things that you share. So we have 5 minutes left. Are there thoughts that you want to add?
Yeah, I want to add one other, and sorry, Norris, I just now saw that your mic came off, but I beat you to it. Sorry. And again, this doesn't come up very often, except when you have Rodney Sampson talking and others like Del Gines, where the question about equity in being able to have the wherewithal to pursue an entrepreneurial vision or an innovation. We tend to think that this is really a function of individual perseverance without also paying some attention to is everybody starting, are folks starting on an equitable basis? And I don't know where that fits into this overall conversation, but it seems to me that when we talk about ecosystems, that the issue of equity be part of it, because that does take sometimes some very purposeful action by either government or philanthropy or other institutions that have sort of broader social goals as part of their larger objective. But anyway, I just want to add that to the conversation. Norris, I cut you off.
Go ahead, Norris.
Actually, I had left the mic unmuted accidentally. So no worries, Peter. I think that we're touching on a very important sort of value proposition for the ecosystem builder profession. That if it's truly an ecosystem, Will Baumol, who is one of the greatest economists who ever worked in the area of entrepreneurship, his sort of model was that he said you can't think of small businesses without large businesses, of new businesses versus old businesses, that it's government, it's nonprofits, that there's this huge mess. The ecosystem is, he didn't use the word ecosystem, but said is this huge, complicated, messy system that there's a role that they can play positively or negatively to each other in that ecosystem. Michael was making me think of, I had a student who went off to, best entrepreneurship student I'd ever seen at the time, went to work for the phone company, for the Ohio Bell, back when they had such a thing. And he stayed there his whole career. However, he created so many innovations there, won multiple prizes, got written up in Harvard Business Review, and his name was never mentioned, which is why he was able to do it. Guys would take credit for his work and then get fired because the antibodies in the bureaucracy fought back and killed them. So Ed did a great job. He had no title whatsoever, but he did have a corner office because the CEO knew his value. We are teaching, there are some skills here that people can be entrepreneurial in a lot of different settings. And so I think there's something there. But figuring out that a lot of what I do is sort of on the ground is figuring out what are the value propositions. All the people out there who are competing for your resources, as well as the people we're competing to help, is have a very clear value proposition for each of the other players in our system. What can we as ecosystem builders do to sell to show people what we are doing matters, whether it is a large company, whether it is a government agency. And a lot of people in ESHIP, that's what they do on a regular basis, is help businesses craft value propositions. Except we're like the shoemaker. Are we like the shoemaker whose kids go barefoot? That maybe we should be a lot more mindful about stakeholder mapping and assessment.
And sustainability.
Sustainability. Well, it is not hard. You could be the liaison animateur of your own ecosystem. It's just a matter of finding those value propositions.
I think, Norris, to your point, I agree. I think going back to what Peter was saying about equitability the discussions that are had. I'm certified in cultural competency, and one of the things that we've been saying DEI forever, right? Diversity, equity, inclusion, and it needs to all be there. And now belonging is becoming the other buzzword around it. And while there's a sense of belonging that needs to be fostered, I like what Forward Cities put in. They talk about abide for the meaning of the word abide, but also in taking apart. So the superpower acronym thing that Norris has, abide stands for access, belonging, inclusion, diversity, and equity. And that access is huge, because for a long time, and even still, there's less accessibility to resources, and we've done that when you pull up all of the entrepreneur support efforts, and how women and people of color and rural environments are always very low on that rung. So anyway, this has been really interesting. Hopefully, as Jeff and Beth watch the call, and as we evolve this further, there'll be a lot of that. Michael, I will bring up your proposal. I don't know if we're too far along in the framework, but I really like the way you were thinking about being able to share an accessibility of this work by so not sponsorship. What would you call that model? You're gonna have to either come up with a buzzword name for it, or Norris will create an acronym.
Oh God, please. So one other thing about the planning, just to be mindful of. So when you have it in Kansas City, everybody's in one place at one time.
Mm-hmm.
When you have it virtual, we're talking multiple time zones.
Mm-hmm.
And so we need to be careful not to exclude Alaska and Hawaii from this.
Noted. Yes. There's, look, poor Chad gets on these calls, and it's usually like 4 o'clock in the morning for him when he gets on the calls. Meanwhile, it's about 11 o'clock at night for Valto. So as we've grown this into a global community, there are challenges as well. So
yeah, but at least I'm more concerned about it's just the U.S. in this context. But
okay.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you all for your time and energy and all the wonderful insights that you share. And we will look forward to seeing you on the next call.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Great job.
Bye.